So I thought this could be an interesting idea for a video, more of a general discussion type video instead of something where it's, I'm showing you film or showing you data. It's more of just talking about a specific topic and giving my thoughts on it. The topic that we're going to be talking about is quarterbacks, and when should you draft quarterbacks and when should you trade up for quarterbacks, the quarterback draft situation in general. Because I think a lot of people have the question of, why is seemingly no one good at the quarterback evaluation thing? Some people will look at specific people in the media, look at their history of how they evaluated quarterbacks and say, oh, look at what idiots. How could they think of that? People say, oh, the Bears. How are they so stupid to draft Mitchell Trubisky before they drafted Patrick Mahomes? The reality is, and I've been thinking a lot about this over the years I've been doing this, and I think the reason why it's so difficult to evaluate quarterbacks is it's kind of the one position where you're basically drafting no one who is at the NFL level. Basically, and there are exceptions to this, but for the most part, every quarterback that you draft is not an NFL caliber quarterback. And even, people like Justin Herbert, who went on and had a great rookie year and was legitimately a good quarterback year one. Even in that year one situation, he made a lot of improvements from college to the NFL. He did do a lot of work and did become a better quarterback even himself. So, and that's the exception. That rarely happens. Typically, the great quarterbacks don't particularly play fantastic right away, or maybe they'll play okay right away and eventually become good, that kind of stuff. But for most quarterbacks, it's a learning process. And, someone like Trevor Lawrence, for example, can't miss prospect, right? Everyone agreed this is a guy who is an awesome prospect. Not everyone had him first overall. Most people did, and the people that didn't still said, no, he's still awesome, though, because pretty much that was what everyone thought. But there were still some things he had to learn. I mean, his college tape in Clemson was very much throw a screen pass, fake a screen pass, and throw it deep. And he kind of had to learn how to run an offense, and it took him some time to do it. You could blame Urban Meyer for the first year, but even after that, in year two, it took him some time with Doug Peterson before he finally mastered the offense. And then he finally did, and looked like he's living up to his potential, and we all expect him to be great next year. That's kind of the way it works for most of these quarterbacks, is you're drafting someone hoping that they get better. And when you do that, it's just obviously really hard to project who is going to get better and who isn't. Even this upcoming, draft class, guys who I really like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. I think they're both great prospects. I don't think either of them are bust proof. I think both could potentially fail. And I could see legitimate reasons. I think for CJ Stroud, like him a lot as a prospect, there's some footwork issues that I think he's going to have to fix if he's going to work in the NFL. And I have some issues about Bryce Young as well. I think he tries to fit the ball through too many tight windows, and that could get him in trouble. And while you might say, well, those are things you can fix, well, Sam Darnold never fixed those things. Did we know Sam Darnold wasn't going to fix those things, or did he just not fix those things? It's really hard to project. And I think that's step one when we talk about trying to get quarterbacks is, can you successfully, 100% of the time evaluate quarterbacks? No. It's a guessing game, and the best team, really the NFL, tends to have about a 1-in-3 hit rate. And I think that logically you should say, okay, we're not that much smarter than the average NFL team if you are an NFL team. So your hit rate is probably about 1-in-3. That's what you should feel like going in. And so because of the low hit rate, you could make the argument, well, is that worth drafting in the first overall drafting a quarterback, because it could fail, it could backfire, but it's of course the risk reward scenario of, would you rather spend a first overall pick on a quarterback that has a 1-in-3 chance of being a star, or drafting a player who probably will be a star at a different position? That's not guaranteed either, but has a better chance of working. The difference though is that, let's say, CJ Stroud versus Jalen Carter, right? Which one should you draft? Jalen Carter, we can feel pretty confident, probably going to be a really good interior defensive lineman, but the difference between an elite quarterback and an elite interior defensive lineman is just night and day. It's not even close. I mean, the teams that have elite quarterbacks are consistently competing for championships for the most part, with few exceptions. The teams that don't have, the teams that have elite interior defensive linemen are all across the board. Some are very good, some are very poor. I mean, what? J.J. Watt put together one of the best defensive seasons we ever saw with the Texans, who went 4-12 that year. I mean, this is just the value of, the positional value is just different. It just is. And so getting the elite quarterback, it's worth taking many swings, drafting a guy, hoping it works out, and then several years later, if it doesn't, well, then draft another guy and hope that works out. Because the reality is, if you don't have an elite quarterback, someone else does, and you're going to have to try and beat them. And the easiest way to do that is to have an elite quarterback of your own. But what about the other ways you can make this work? Like, what about, trading up? Because again, sure, if you have first overall pick, it's easy. Or even like the Texans, who have the number 2 overall pick, whatever. You get a good quarterback prospect, you're good. You don't have to think about it. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. What about the Panthers, though, who traded up a lot to make sure that they were able to get their number 1 overall pick to hopefully get a quarterback who can be their future? You think about the Rams and the Eagles, who traded up a lot to get quarterbacks that they thought would be the future, and they weren't. Now, Carson Wentz still won them helped them win a Super Bowl, I should say, so you feel okay about that pick, but still. It's an interesting question of, would you rather trade up? Like I think about the 49ers is another good example. They trade 3 first-round picks to trade up and get a quarterback who, like we said, only has about a 1 in 3 chance of hitting. Is that the better move, or is the better move to draft 3 different quarterbacks and hope that it works out that way? And it's debatable. I think that it's probably an okay move to do it. I made a video talking about if you should trade up and talking about, previous trade-ups in recent history, and pretty much the only teams that traded up and won the trade, it was almost exclusively when they traded up for a quarterback. Like, that's pretty much the one way you can do that and win the trade, because if you get the elite quarterback, it's worth it. And while it's hard to predict which quarterback is going to be elite, they tend to be one of the few that were selected early on. Like, that is the one thing that people tend to get pretty good, is they say, hey, one of these or 2 of these 5 quarterbacks is going to be the elite guy. We just don't know which one, but it's going to be one of these, caliber players. So because of that, making sure you get one of those players could be the right move, but it also, maybe in another way, can make you say, hey, because of the fact that we don't know exactly which one of these quarterbacks is going to hit, maybe trying to make sure we get the first one isn't as important as some people might think. Like, if you're the Indianapolis Colts, maybe it was the right move to, instead of trading up to number 1, even if you loved Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud, maybe waiting and getting an Anthony Richardson, who maybe you don't love as much as a prospect, but the reality is could still very much work out, because this thing is hard to predict. Also, maybe this is why you go after someone like Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, who both have massive issues that you have to worry about. But the logic is, there is no bust-proof quarterback. And while it seems like, well, Anthony Richardson has to completely work on his throwing motion and has to figure out how to be accurate, well, C.J. Stroud has to work on his footwork when he's under pressure, right? Both of those 2 things happen. And while one seems way more obvious than the other, if neither one of them fixes their issues, neither one of them is going to work out. So maybe you don't feel as bad about taking a risk at the quarterback position, because the reward is just so important. At least that's how I see it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.